this is Jeremy Brown with Move Ed. Thanks for joining us today for the first video in our video series, 3D, 3 diaphragms, 3 dimensions of breathing. Our first video today is going to be on the pelvis and the pelvic floor. We have today here for all of our videos Susan helping us out as our model, and you're going to start where she is today, lying on a mat. Just setting up something comfortable. You can have your knees bent or legs straight, or if you want to have a little comfortable towel or pillow rolled up behind your knees, that's just fine. The last option, you could have your legs lifted up and resting on a chair or on the edge of a couch. Often if you're having any discomfort in your lower back or your hips, having the legs elevated can take off a lot of pressure and kind of ease tension and discomfort. You can certainly have a pillow behind your head or a little folded towel behind your head if you're at all uncomfortable in your neck or in the skull, if it's causing any issues. But we're going to begin here with the hands resting on the hips, because we're going to be, again, focusing on breath down through the lower belly, the pelvic floor, and the pelvis. And the first thing we're going to change in this video is just our awareness of our breath cycle. So just notice, first off, how long it's taking you to take a breath in and how long it's taking to allow breath out. And we're going to start to expand that time so that both the breath in and the breath out take 1 to 3 seconds, maybe even as long as 4 if we can. So try to expand to a nice slow 2 count, 3 count, if comfortable 4 count on both the inhale and on the exhale. Now, a longer breath doesn't necessarily mean a bigger breath. It doesn't mean we have to take in more air, not a big full breath, just a slower, easier, more gentle breath. That gives us a little more time to allow change as we move through some different concepts of where this breath is going to happen. So often, we don't allow full use of all of the places we could make breath happen within our body. Right? So first off, we're going to talk about the very bottom of our pelvis, our pelvic floor. So if you're seated in a chair, the bones that you're seated on are your sits bones, the bones on the bottom of your pelvis. Those what are the bones you'd feel in contact with the seat, right underneath our hips. So one underneath either side of the pelvis. And we're going to start there. Feel free if you want to kind of reach around and find those bones on the bottom of your pelvis if you want a little feedback. And we're going to begin on this nice, slow, easy breath in to imagine that those 2 bones could relax away from each other, because often they're kind of squeezed together. And then on the exhale, we're going to try not to squeeze together any tension that we managed to release on an inhale. And then the same thing again as you cycle back to an inhale, allowing on an inhale this sense that the bottom of the pelvis, the bottom of your hips could start to relax and widen side to side. And then again on the exhale, just managing to keep any ease that you manage to find on your inhale. And we'll just go through a couple of breath patterns there. Nice, slow, at your own pace. Visualizing that the bottom of the pelvis can widen side to side, relax into a wider position, and that as we exhale, we try to keep that ease because we are just resting on the ground. Then, the next 2 bones we're going to think about, the next 2 markers, are the pubic bone, which is right at the bottom of the hip crease on the front of the pelvis, and the tailbone, right at the bottom of our spine, all the way at the end. You should feel like your tail's kind of sitting heavy in the mat. Pubic bones on the front of the pelvis. And we're going to think about those 2 bones as we breathe in, starting again to move away from each other, but this time front to back, so that as we take a breath in, pubic bone moves away from tailbone and tailbone moves away from pubic bone. And as we exhale, we try to keep a little bit of that ease. We try not to squeeze those bones back together on the exhale. So it'll feel almost as though the pubic bone starts to drift maybe up toward the ceiling or release up toward the ceiling, and the tailbone starts to hang a little heavier in the mat. We'll just continue with that for a second, trying to feel, again, on the inhale, nice, slow, easy, gentle inhale, that the pubic bone and tailbone move away from each other. Now, expanding that idea at the bottom of the pelvis, we're just going to think about all 4 of those points at once. So we have an axis on the bottom of the pelvis going side to side, and an axis on the bottom of the pelvis going front to back. So as we take a breath in, try to imagine both of those directions of expansion at once, or release of tension at once. And again, on an exhale, just trying to keep that ease and relaxation that you managed to cultivate on the inhale. Or even maybe feeling like there's a circle that goes all the way around all 4 of those bones, and as we breathe in, that circle expands. So just as not to overcomplicate things, but starting to just get a bigger picture of the way that works. Now, we're going to let that go for just a few cycles of breath. Just continue with the same idea. As I breathe in, the bottom of my pelvis widens and lengthens front to back, so that the entire space relaxes more. And on the exhale, I try to manage to keep some of that space. And while we do that, we're going to talk about just the quality of breath a little bit more. So it's always, I think, a really interesting note, and Susan agrees with me. Thankfully, she pointed this out for us, that we don't have a fan or a motor in our face that makes this happen. So we're trying to actually make more room in our pelvis for air to flow into our body. We're not pulling air into our nose or pulling air into our mouth and trying to push it down into our pelvis. What we're trying to do is realize, oh, I'm probably holding some excessive tension, and I could start to release some of that tension, and that as that space expands more, it makes more room for more air to flow in through my nose, down through my throat and into my lungs. And that's the concept that we're going to continue with as we move on through our other breathing videos as well, that we're expanding capacity and allowing air to flow into the body. So, moving up from the bottom of the pelvis up to the top of the pelvis, we're going to leave our hands resting on the lower belly and start to bring a little awareness to the lower belly and the hip crease. So as we take a breath in, ideally, it should feel like the skin and muscles of the lower belly relax and expand into the fingertips, maybe rising a little bit toward the ceiling. And then as we exhale, while you might feel that those muscles sink back away from you, you shouldn't feel like you squeeze the lower belly in. There's just a sense of the lower belly, the muscle skin of the lower belly relaxing back into the mat. On the opposite side of the body, in contact with the mat, we have your sacrum. It's that big flat space on the back of your pelvis that's resting on the ground. And as we take a breath in, you should feel like your sacrum could relax a little heavier into the mat. It's kind of right above your tailbone. And as we exhale, we want to feel like we are able to keep that kind of heavy, relaxed feeling through that space. You could also be a little bit aware that on the inhale, right under your pinky fingers where they're resting in the hip crease, on the inhale, it should feel like your hip crease could relax a little more, maybe sink back into the mat a little more. Often there's a tendency to hold a lot of tension in the hip flexors, perhaps coming from being in a seated position for extended amounts of time during the day. And so for a couple of breaths, let's just think about that as we breathe in, the sacrum could sink and rest a little heavier in the mat, the back of the pelvis could relax a little heavier in the mat, and the lower belly could softly expand away from that, allowing the hips to relax a little bit more, the thighs to relax a little more. And then again on the exhale, we're just trying to maintain that nice, soft, easy quality. So avoiding any tension or gripping on an exhale. Last thing we're going to do here in the pelvis, we're going to slide our hands just a little wider so they're resting on the sides of the hips. So your palms, you can either have your palms sitting flat in toward the sides, or you could take your thumb and index finger away from each other and just circle your hands around the edges of your hips. Whatever's most comfortable for you. And just like we were thinking about the sits bones being allowed to widen, as we breathe in, the top of the pelvis, while it may not get a lot of movement, certainly does have some availability of ease. You could feel that as you breathe in, you allow the two big bones on the top of the pelvis to relax out into your hands. Again, for just a nice, slow, easy breath in. And then as we breathe out, we're trying not to squeeze those bones back together, but just allow that nice, easy resting quality in the palms or in the hands. It can be surprising through all of this as we work our way through all these kind of different segments exactly how much tension we hold in our hips and pelvis. And ideally, this easy, expansive, full breath quality that we're looking at here is something we can start to carry over through more and more of our day and more of our life. So let's just take a couple more breaths and get a little sense of this full picture. So we have a circle, a ring at the top of the pelvis under your hands, where we have the two sides of the pelvis, the back of the pelvis, the sacrum, and the front of the pelvis, the lower belly. So that's one circle. And then we have another circle at the bottom of the pelvis where our sits bones, pubic bone, and tailbone are. And just trying to imagine as we breathe in that both that top circle and that bottom circle both get a nice, full, easy expansion. Maybe noticing any release of tension that happens as we take that breath in. And then as we exhale, we're going to try not to squeeze all of that back together. We're going to try to keep that nice, easy, free space that we created on the inhale. And while you do just a couple more of those breaths, I'm going to do the regular YouTube thing and mention if you've enjoyed today's video, it would be amazing if you would click the like and subscribe button to see what we have coming out in the future. And please share it with any friends or family you think that this would be of interest or use to. So thanks for tuning in for this video. Check out the next in the series where we're going to be exploring the next diaphragm up, the respiratory diaphragm, the ribs, and the abdominals. Thanks a lot. See you soon.